Hey, good evening. Good evening. Sorry, this is Tim Ash, President of the Vermont State Senate. It is Thursday, April 7th. This is my evening update on Vermont's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I've got two great guests tonight to talk about some of the challenges that our education system has faced as we've moved almost overnight to distance learning. And we'll benefit from hearing from one of Vermont's best teachers and also a great student about what it's been like on both sides of the education ledger. Before we get started, I just want to say a quick update that while the governor has made some additional easing of economic activity, I'm going to hold off on providing any substantial update until my weekly wrap up tomorrow at 5:30, because there's going to be some additional guidance issued tomorrow about the restart of childcare facilities, summer camps, overnight camps, and possibly even how schools might successfully find a way to commemorate seniors at the end of the year through some kind of graduation ceremonies or diploma ceremonies. So I'm going to hold off on that till tomorrow. While it's all good news that we can have some additional engagement with our friends and neighbors, it's also worth noting that there were 7 additional positive tests reported in the last 24 hours. So it's this balancing act between slowly reopening things while also having our eyes on the public health numbers, because we don't want to find ourselves opening up too quickly and then having to shut things back down. So tomorrow I'll provide more updates on the governor's his new guidance from yesterday, but also what he's going to be talking about tomorrow at his press conference. And I'll try to provide as good a summary as I can. But tonight we're going to benefit from a discussion with two people in the Winooski High School system. We have Luke Dorfman, who's a teacher at Winooski, and Hussein Amuri, who's a junior at Winooski. So welcome, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with a bit of I'm going to start with a question, Luke, for you, and then we'll transition to Hussein. So Winooski High School, has a lot of similarities with high schools all over the state, but give us just a quick sense of what Winooski High School is like on a given day. There's students from all over the world. What's the pre-COVID-19 Winooski High School look and feel like?
Sure, yeah. So Winooski is a really special community, and it has a close place to my heart. It is a remarkably diverse community as well. And so, as you mentioned, we've got students and families from all over the world who are refugees themselves or immigrants. And we've got just a really robust community of people who've been here for a long time. And so, day-to-day life before this crisis, had a feel of, whatever we called sort of normal school, right? We've got sort of a structured schedule, a block schedule to our normal day in the high school. And, students kind of move from class to class. We have the privilege of being, a single hallway. And so it is a pretty tight knit community, and we definitely benefit from being really small and getting to know our students really closely. And then clearly things have changed pretty drastically since then. And so we're really excited to share a bit about the challenges that have certainly come up along the way as well.
All right, great. Now, Hussein, you're a high school junior. Tell us what some of your interests are, both in terms of school and extracurricular stuff like sports. What are the things that you normally enjoy at Winooski High?
I enjoy a lot of things, and I think one of the big, favorite things that I usually do at school is writing. And actually, this past school year, this semester, I was enrolled in a writing seminar class, and in that class, we were all writing a book actually. And before this pandemic began, we're kind of outlining. We're all kind of outlining the chapters of like where we're going to be writing. Again, it was a mystery book. It was based in Winooski, and that was really great actually, because I kind of got to write something that I knew from my perspective living in Winooski. But I'm also kind of, a community engagement type of person. I love, engaging with my community, doing a lot of stuff, helping out. And actually, during the semester, I was enrolled in a capstone class called the Culture and Community Capstone class, which actually Mr. Dorfman is one of the teachers that teaches that class. And in that class, I worked with the Winooski Charter Commission, trying to advise the city council in kind of, changing the charter and allowing non-citizen people in Winooski to be able to participate in local elections. Something that was, really, touching because, mainly my mom's an immigrant. She works 2 jobs, and, I would love to see her have a say in where, her money goes and where, her taxes goes, because she has two kids attending, Winooski, and yeah. But I'm also, big soccer fan, so I play soccer at school a lot. Yeah.
So you play sports, but really dive into the school material and a bunch of community activities. So pretty well-rounded guy, sounds like.
I appreciate it.
We'll learn a little bit more. Sometimes resumes can be deceiving, but we'll talk a little more about that. So Hussein, one of the things that we all were experiencing back in the beginning of March was seeing in the news COVID-19 in Europe and in Asia. And then we started to get the sense that it was going to come to the US and here in Vermont. At what point as a student did you start to realize that something may change for you at school?
I think it was during, actually I got the news from some of my friends that there were, kids at Rice who went to a field trip in Italy. And when they got back, they were kind of, ordered to be quarantined. And, when, I first found out, things are going to, be changing a lot. And actually, I think, I don't know, it was this week.
Oh, having a little challenge on the volume, Hussein. All right, well, let's hold off on Hussein for a second, see if we can get the volume worked out. Luke, as a teacher on your side of the equation, what was the moment where you realized that normal classroom teaching might not be long for Winooski?
Yeah, so I've been following certainly the news globally, since December, January time, and then really once the reporting and the coverage started to focus in on the U.S. And more and more information around testing and just the numbers and kind of a lot of the projections and modeling. Once that really got going, I quickly gained the sense that we were going to be impacted in some way, and still really unclear about what that would look like. And then it really was, as we entered March, conversation and certainly sort of like the hum in the air, like it certainly started to elevate in terms of like, oh, well, things actually could really change and look a lot differently really soon, a lot sooner than maybe we had been anticipating. And then certainly once the governor started putting together a task force, like we knew at that point, we're going to be taking steps and making some significant changes.
How much preparation did teachers have for the concept of distance learning before COVID-19? Had there been enough work in advance so that when the declaration came that schools were going to close in mid-March, it was almost like you just took the plan and went with it? Or did you have to really spend a couple days on overdrive trying to figure out how you were going to translate your curriculum over into a distant learning model?
Yeah, no, it definitely, I think overdrive definitely feels like an appropriate word. Like it was very abrupt, and, we had to really change things within a short period of time. And, over many years, right, a lot of teachers and educators have been transitioning and sort of experimenting with online learning and, using digital platforms. So it definitely varied teacher to teacher in terms of comfort and familiarity with how to make that shift. But I would say the biggest challenge really is just in terms of the systems and structures in place. And, so there wasn't necessarily a coherent plan that we were just like turning to and, using kind of seamlessly. Instead, it was just a lot of decisions having to be made really quickly. And so with that, obviously comes a lot of challenges when you just can't necessarily get the feedback that you're looking for from a variety of different stakeholder groups. So yeah, the shift was pretty challenging. And
did Did you need to know which students had which technology to be able to have continuity in their education plans? How is it? I can't imagine every school has a total understanding of what every household's like, but how did you know how you were going to best meet each kid's needs once they got home?
Yeah, well, we definitely relied on a lot of our existing structures and just knowledge and familiarity with families. And so certainly drawing from that base knowledge, we sent out surveys. So the district definitely quickly put into place some outreach efforts to families to really learn what are their needs, how can we be supporting them. But even still, like from understanding and gaining that knowledge to then being able to act on it and, bring those services home to families that needed it. There's still plenty of time between those two moments. And so, I'd say just needing to be flexible and adapt and just continue to revise and evolve our plans over time has been a really big part of it.
Great. It sounds like the relationship you already have with students helps you anticipate what's gonna work for them.
Oh, yeah.
Hussein, have we figured out your audio yet?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, we can hear you now. So from a student's point of view, schools officially closed, I think, on March 18th. It was a Wednesday. I might have the number wrong, but it was definitely a Wednesday when it closed officially. What were the first few days like when you were not going to school anymore, but you were at home and wondering how we're going to happen from there? What was that like?
I think for me, the big thing was kind of, trying to get all my work done because during that time, I had received quite a lot of work from, my teachers and not to mention I was actually kind of doing a lot of, class projects, which are final projects that, I myself have to defend in front of a committee and kind of trying, my best, navigating how am I going to, meet the requirement, when I'm not with my teacher. I did a lot of, creative things where, I will kind of schedule my day in a way that, allows me to be able to contact my teachers and ask them questions. I was also very not confused, but I had a lot of questions actually about what was going on. Okay, how long was this class? Okay, what are some the things that the governor or like the state is doing to kind of help out? And with those kind of questions, contact my teachers, and ask them. And I did that for quite often, kind of just put myself in a mood where I was always comfortable and was not terrified like most people. And it helped. The crisis is still going on, the pandemic is still on, and we're still suffering. But I guess I'm holding on to my family, my friends, and my community, and that's helping me a lot.
Well, you sound like you adjusted much better than most people in Vermont. Were there any changes that didn't feel so good in terms of, being isolated from your friends, not being able to get outside, do things like that? What are the downsides that you've experienced, if any?
I think I think being here has kind of put us in a situation where I'm not very physically engaged because during this before the pandemic I was very engaged with my coach, my track coach on a lot of running activities and kind of working on getting ready for the season. And I think when this pandemic began, I kind of lost that touch with my coach. I mean, I would still talk to him over Zoom or emails, but I missed his guidance and I missed him talking to me, running with me, kind of showing me how do you properly run at 15-meter 100 grades in a track experience. How do you do that? And it didn't feel as good as just talking to him over the phone or just getting him getting his messages over my phone. And
how does it feel to not have a track season, to lose that junior year track season?
It feels terrible. I'm a very athletic guy, and sports means a lot to me because it's my way of making friends. It's my way of representing my community on those big soccer games or big track days. And it's my way of staying in touch with who I am. And I feel like I lost that big part of me when all this was canceled. I actually, got an email over, a couple of days ago from athletic director about, how the season is finally canceled. Spring season is finally canceled, and that was a big hit. I miss my friends. I miss, being able to compete. I'm a competitor, but I don't do it, I'm a competitor because I love competing, and it feels good. It feels good, pushing yourself, and I feel like I lost that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I often run on North Avenue in Burlington, so I go by the athletic fields, and this time of year they're normally full with whether it's track or softball or baseball, lacrosse, and right now it's totally empty. And so I think back to my high school when I would have been playing baseball right now and how much that meant to me. So I totally understand why it feels like there's something missing,
It's a big loss.
Yeah. So Luke, in terms of teaching, our educators, I think, most of us, hopefully all Vermonters, but most Vermonters at least, are really appreciative of how quickly educators and school staff have converted over to distant learning and also trying to meet kids' needs in other ways, which normally are in the school, but now it's like having to go out into the community. In terms of the actual experience of distance learning, there are some people who sort of say, oh, well, this proves that online learning is basically the same. I'm a traditionalist, so I have my doubts about it, but what's been your sense of whether you and your peers, not whether you've been doing your best to adjust, but what's the experience like from a quality point of view? Do you think that this is something that if it was to continue on well into the next school year, it would really be a disadvantage to current high school students? Or is it a situation where it's a different kind of learning, but it's of equal value? What's your reflection on that? And how would you sum up the way your peers at Winooski High feel about it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, certainly speaking from my own perspective, it feels very much not the same. I really do. I've been noticing a lot of the inequities that I feel like this crisis has certainly surfaced and really brought to the forefront. And so when I think about the struggles of different students and families in terms of accessing technology, or when I think about our families who aren't native English speakers, and suddenly there's so much communication being thrown their way and they're struggling to make sense of it. And our homeschool liaisons are doing their very best to be supporting those families, but there's still just a lot of information. We've definitely seen tremendous gaps in terms of who's able to access our learning opportunities. And so that's been a real struggle. And so that's just been one big thing when it comes to distance learning. I think some of my other reflections on our current situation are that what this has shown me, at least, is just how much learning is all about relationships, and it has a very much a social component to it. And we're leaning really hard on those relationships right now in terms of just maintaining connection and making connection sort of the top priority is just continuing to have relationships with students and checking in with them. In terms of my own practice and the side effects of this crisis in terms of how it's really forced us to rethink our own approach to instruction and assessment and things like that. I think it's really raising a lot of questions around what's really important when it comes to teaching and learning. And so in that way, I hope there are some lasting positive effects from this experience in terms of really bringing to the front, the skills and knowledge that we are really hoping to develop in our young people, and not getting so caught up in things that are less important.
No, it's well put. And it's, there's always these attempts to change the way we educate and value different outcomes differently than maybe had been done in the past. And it's probably, we'll always be doing those kinds of reflections and rethinking of how we deliver education. But I think you're right that this is probably the first time in modern Vermont history where the relationship piece really gets put to a different test, and we get a different sense of how important it is to be with one another. And, the legislature hasn't met in person since March 13th, Friday the 13th. I have to remind people. And we are still conducting business remotely, but I would be not honest if I said it was the same. It is different. You can't reach that same understanding that you gain when you're both talking and kind of being able to give a knowing look to someone, or expressing that you really understand what they're saying, or conversely that you have no idea what they're saying, and the need for that continued engagement. Hussein, you're a sharp student. You're working hard. You've kind of quickly transitioned to try to make the most of a very difficult learning situation. How do you think your classmates are doing? Obviously, some students react differently, and maybe it's easier for them than others. But overall, do you think your classmates are wishing they were back in school to be in the presence of their friends and the teachers? Do you think that they're getting the same type of education through their computer screens than they would if they were in person? How do you see it?
To tell you the truth, I see it differently. Actually, a couple of days ago, I had a friend who called me actually and asked me to help him out with some of the school work that he was getting from the teachers, and help him out how to use Zoom. And this is a very issue that we have in our school where kids are struggling to kind of be able to communicate with teachers, even though they're trying their best to communicate with them. They don't know how to. Okay, I'm attending all these Zoom classes with my teachers, and half of the students that I know from school are attending. Okay, and it's not because they don't want to, but like they're having difficulties. I'm on Snapchat sometimes, checking in with my friends, and I'm seeing some of them crying actually on their phone, saying how they miss school so much and they wish to go back. I see them posting photos of their friends from before this whole pandemic began, of kind of just reminding us how different we used to be before we got into this crisis, and how they wish everything was back to normal. I don't think a lot of my peers are adjusting very well, and those can that is because inequities that Ms. Dorfman talked about are very present in Winooski compared to some of the communities that we know in Vermont, and that's a big issue, and I think it's one that we have kind of to tackle. But I think our school administration, our school system is doing a phenomenal job, being there for everyone, even though we're having difficulties.
Well, it's an interesting test of our long-held belief that our public schools are one of the great equalizers. They provide an opportunity for everybody, whether they have a lot of money or they don't, or their skill sets that they bring to school, whether they're strong or weaker students, whether they like sports or they don't, whether they're into theater or something else, or they like extracurricular clubs. They're there for everybody. And right now, they're not. I mean, education is available, but our schools aren't available in the same way that they always are. And I think as you say, Hussein, it points out some of the underlying inequities in our society. And if we had to continue this way, it would be to the great disadvantage of those who aren't familiar with technology or have the resources to have that at their homes in a convenient way, or who don't have a family member or a sibling who can help them out easily. And that's going to be one of the things that I worry about over the course of the summer, is making sure that if there's going to be some uncertainty heading into the fall. I think we all hope school will open the way it normally does, although I'm sure we'll be taking some additional precautions. But we'll want to make sure that if we, for some reason, have to have kids back home, that we don't have some kids not with the equipment and ability to hit the ground running when we come back, because we can't let people miss a few months of 2 years in a row because of, lack of access. So hopefully we'll do a good job there. We've got a couple minutes left. Let me ask you each a final question. And Luke, I'll start with you. So we're now almost 2 months into distance learning at Winooski High. You and all your peers have had to figure out how to connect with kids, make sure they're getting all the material, do Zoom classes, do all the stuff you're doing. Any particular memories or things you look back on already and say, wow, that was a moment where we figured it out. And, either one of my students did something that really stood out, or one of my coworkers did something, or one of the school staff or administrators, anything that stands out already.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a few specific moments come to mind immediately. When I think about the culture and community class that Hussein was talking about earlier, it's a capstone experience. So it's one of our graduation requirements. And so, for a lot of our students in that course, especially our seniors who are quickly approaching the end of their high school career, we've really had to assess and make some modifications or provide different sorts of support. And I have just been completely blown away and amazed by how so many of our students have kind of adapted their projects, and they're community-based projects, right? Their intent is to get them connected to their community, and then here we are in this crisis where they're suddenly so isolated. And seeing how some projects, in particular, one student comes to mind where she has been involved in food insecurity as sort of the issue that she was really exploring. She's connected with the Vermont Food Bank and did some advocacy work in Montpelier earlier in the semester. And, she had done such a robust project. We're like, don't even worry about it. Put together a final presentation and we'll just call it, you've done more than enough there.
Right.
And she just took it upon herself. She's like, no, this is a real issue affecting our community right now. And so she had connected with our district leadership and was asking, like, is there any way for me to get some money so that instead of just having food distributed to families, we can bring seeds and soil home to those families as well so they can start growing their own food. And again, this was just totally something she took it upon herself to pursue. And it's just taking her project to this next level. And talk about impacting your community in a positive way during a time where all of us are really struggling and grappling with that very question, has been so inspiring. And again, that's just one student out of many.
It's a great story. And I'll just, before I ask Hussein a version of the same question, the day before the State House shut down, there were Winooski High School students down at the State House advocating for more support for programs that provided local produce through the Vermont Food Bank and other food organizations like the Chittenden Emergency Food Shelf, which is now called Feeding Chittenden. And I don't think any of us appreciated when they were sitting in my office that just a couple weeks later, we would be talking about the need to greatly increase on an emergency basis the number of local food that was getting out to our neighbors. So if you can tell them that I have not forgotten that meeting, and it was a very, very powerful message that they delivered, and it proved to be very timely. Hussein, you're on the student side of it. Any particularly memorable moments from the last 2 months as you've shifted over to distance learning?
I think.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
There we go. Hussein, we're not hearing you right when you were going to tell us something uplifting. Oh no, I'm going to have you back in order to tell you that I can't end on a tech fail. Give it one more shot, Hussein. See if we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. I think like one of the memorable things that, happened to all of us, especially in one of my capstone class, was how, a lot of my peers were terrified about, how I'm going to, make, our final presentation for a capstone, be more memorable. And, we were all afraid, how we're going to be doing that. But I think, I was very, happy when, we all said, we're going to try our best and commit the project that we chose and, do our best, to make sure that everything, goes fine, even though with this, pandemic, in place, the mentality that, everyone showed, the love and hope that everyone, put into their, learning was just amazing, and was something that, I'm going to be, keeping in my mind, forever, because that's all you need in this type of situation. The mentality of saying, we got this, we can do this, and the mentality of saying, okay, no matter what happened, we got each other, and yeah.
Well, that's a great way to go out on our conversation on a hopeful note. And it's pretty inspirational to hear both from your point of view, Luke, on the teaching side and your peers about how quickly you've adapted to meet kids' needs and make sure they continue to learn in these last few months of the school year with so much uncertainty and anxiety. And Hussein, it's pretty inspirational to hear that you and your fellow students are stepping up to make it work on your end. Because I know that it is a huge shock to the system to have to go from a routine of 5 days a week in the school with all the faces and sights and sounds, and then suddenly you're kind of trapped at home and at just the time you want to be getting out in the warm weather and kind of living up the end of a school year, which is always kind of a special time. So I want to thank you guys both for joining me and providing some insights to people around the state about what it's been like in our public high schools over these last 2 months. And for everyone else watching, I'll be back tomorrow at 5:30. And just a reminder, I'll be doing basically a weekend recap focusing on yesterday's announcements by Governor Scott about additional economic activity and recreation. And then also some anticipated announcements he will be making tomorrow related to childcare and also camps, summer camps and things, because we know that right now some camps are closing proactively, but they're going to provide some guidance about how they could be conducted safely moving forward. So hope everyone continues to stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow.